everybody, it's Mel. Thank you for joining me today for a recent reading wrap-up. So I told you a while ago when I did the first of the recent reads rather than monthly wrap-ups that I would be doing these whenever I had read about 4 or 5 books, and I was doing it this way rather than monthly because I wasn't necessarily reading enough books to warrant it each month. However, I have got 8 books to talk to you about today, and I think that is partly because I had 2 books that I was reading for several months and I finally finished them. And also because my partner is on parenting leave, and so I have more time to devote to reading than I did when he was working full-time or even 2 days a week, because I'm not the only one devoting as much time to the baby, if that makes sense. I am notorious for talking a lot about each book, so I'm going to try not to do that today, just simply because otherwise we'll be here for a million years. So anyway, let's talk about the books. So these go in the order in which I finished them and then wrote them into the journal. So they're not even necessarily the order I finished them, it's when I get around to writing them in the journal. Not that that's really all that important, to be honest. So I need to tell you about 2 books that I read at the end of July, and then the rest of the books are books that I read in August. The first book that I want to talk to you about is The Spirit of the Crocodile by Aaron Farzo, Michelle Scott Tucker, and Lynn White. This is a middle grade written by 3 authors who I believe are all Indigenous Australians from the Torres Strait. So the Torres Strait Islands are a group of islands that technically belong to Australia and are up in the Torres Strait, up in the far north of Queensland, far north of Australia. So the Indigenous population of the Torres Strait Islands are related to the Indigenous people, as far as I'm aware, of the rest of Australia, but there are some differences. So this is a book written by Torres Strait Islanders, Indigenous Torres Strait Islanders, and it is about Indigenous Torres Strait Islanders. It takes place on an island that I cannot remember the name of, but it is one of the smaller islands. Like I said, it's a middle grade. I read this for the Australian Readathon, which took place in July, and it was one of Steph from Novelty Corner's host favourite selections. I will just say before I continue that anyone I talk about in this video will be linked down below, so you can go and check them out, subscribe, etc. So this is a contemporary story, and it follows a young boy called Ezra, and Ezra is, I think, like 13 or something. Yeah, he must be around 13 because he is about to finish primary school or elementary school and go to high school, but because where he lives is very small, they don't have a high school, and so he will have to go to Thursday Island, which is where the nearest high school is, and that means that he basically has to go and live with his aunt, and he's feeling really nervous about this. And because he's a or just turned teen, you know, him and his friends, his best friend in particular, they're at slightly different stages in their lives. So his best friend is really excited about high school, he's starting potentially to think about girls and, you know, relationships and that sort of thing, whereas Ezra is a bit behind that developmentally, hasn't sort of gone down that road yet, or not even developmentally, just isn't there yet. Anyway, or it potentially won't, you know what I mean, potentially won't be there, who knows, but it hasn't, it's not a thing. Anyhow, so it's called The Spirit of the Crocodile because he belongs to the crocodile people who follow the spirit of the crocodile, but it's about him coming to terms with going to high school, and it's a few days, it's about a week or 2 weeks in school holidays. There is a tsunami, I guess, well, not a tsunami, sorry, a big storm event. I don't know if it's technically like it's not technically a cyclone, I don't think, but a big storm event happens in his town, and it's really scary, as you'd imagine, and throughout this experience he kind of grows up a little bit and gets a little bit less worried about high school. Anyway, I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really well written. I thought that it talked about those feelings of being afraid of high school, of growing up, of being in a different place mentally and emotionally to your friends, being unsure of what's going on, of feeling displaced, all of that sort of thing that comes with becoming a teenager and having to make those changes in your life and those physical changes happening and everything. I thought they did that really, really well. I gave it 4 stars. I gave it 4 in the peach scale as well, so 4 stars. So I did think it was fantastic. It wasn't quite a 5-star read. It didn't blow me away. It wasn't anything, you know, unbelievable or incredible. I mean, partly that is because it's a middle grade, probably, because, you know, it's not written for me. But I think for the age group that it's written for, it's really, really well done. And yeah, I definitely highly recommend for kids of that age. It is an area of Australia I don't know very much about, and it is a people that I don't know very much about, so that was really interesting from that perspective. It's great to see Torres Strait Island authors and experiences being depicted, so that was really excellent. And yeah, definitely would recommend. It's definitely worth a read for an adult, but particularly for the age group, for the sort of, I guess it would probably be like 10 and up to like maybe 14, I would say would be the best age group for that. So yeah, that's that. So the next book that I read was A Decline in Profits by Sulari Gentil. This is the second book in the Roland Sinclair mystery series. This I also read for the Australian Readathon. One of the prompts was randomly selected and got my cat Peanut to select it, and the book she actually selected was a different book, but I found that really confusing. I ended up DNFing it, so I went for the next book that she ate the food off of, which is A Decline in Profits. But yeah, anyway, the second book in the series, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4.1 in Peach, so I rounded that down to 4 stars for Goodreads. And again, I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's very well written and just, yeah, really fun to read. I like the characters, and like I said, well written. I like the writing style, etc. So this is a mystery book. It is a historical mystery. It takes place in the 1920s or 30s, I think. Or is it? Yeah, it's 1930s. And we follow mostly this character, Roland Sinclair. Roland Sinclair is an artist. He is a rich person. He's in the upper classes of Australia. He lives in Sydney, in one of the more influential suburbs in Sydney. And like I said, he is an artist as well, and he is friends with a lot of different artists. Has this really huge estate in this part of Sydney, and he has a lot of his artist friends come to stay with him and live with him. So he's sort of a patron of the arts, as it were, as well as being an artist himself. So despite his position within society from a class perspective, his politics are left-leaning and his friends are more of the artist circle. In the first book, he got embroiled in figuring out a mystery to do with the old guard versus the new Labour and left socialists. He ended up in a position where it felt his brother, and he felt that he would be better off. Well, he didn't really agree, but his brother and various people related to them and knowing friends with them and in their circle felt that he would be better off if he was out of Australia for a while. So him and his 3 people that live with him, his friends, Edith, Milton and Clive, all go on this ocean liner around, do a tour of Europe. This book is actually set ocean liner on their way back to Australia, and again, they find themselves embroiled in this mystery. But yeah, like I said, it was really well written and very enjoyable. It's written in a way that would have been very of its time, were it written in the time period it's representing, if that makes sense. But yeah, so it's not sexist or racist or anything like that, but Sulari Gentil doesn't shy away from presenting those beliefs and people who are like that. So just be aware of that, but I do think they're really enjoyable. If you like Golden Age of detective mysteries, I think you would really enjoy this series. And yeah, that's how I feel about that one. Just realised the light had turned off, so there I go again doing that. Alright, so the next lot of books are books that I read in the month of August, or books that I finished in the month of August, which I may not have been reading solely in August. So anyway, the first book of that, the next book that I want to talk about is Role Playing by Cathy Yardley. So I feel like this was reasonably popular on BookTube probably last year sometime. As usual, I'm a bit late to the party. But anyway, this is a contemporary romance book. We follow two main characters. We follow Maggie and Aiden, I think is the main male character's name. Maggie is the grumpy. He is the sunshine. I quite liked that kind of role reversal because it's often the other way around. They're older people as well, which is something I really enjoyed. I think they are in their 40s and 50s, late 40s, early 50s. So the setup is Maggie lives in this sort of smallish town in, I think it's like Central North America, USA, America. She's not very social. She doesn't really have any friends physically in that area, but she's a big gamer. She does a lot of multiplayer gaming online. Her son's gone off to college and moved across country. Her son's best friend's mother, Maggie, runs into this woman on several occasions, and this woman is trying to kind of get Maggie a bit out of a shell and get her socialising. In the meantime, we have Aiden. He's moved back to this place, which was his hometown. So Maggie didn't grow up here, but Aiden grew up here, and he's moved back to help look after his mum. But his mum is quite a kind of cantankerous older woman who doesn't want his help really, and won't admit that there are things that she can't do anymore, that she's getting old and needs assistance. Anyway, Aiden, because he's moved back from quite a bit of absence and also spending a lot of time caring for his mum, doesn't really have any friends either. They both know the same people, or they know people that know them, if that makes sense. How does it go? I think she's either, it's suggested by her son, I think, or maybe her son's best friend, or it's suggested by somebody who's young in like college or university that she joined this online gaming group that play this game that she really loves. So she does. And she starts getting along really well with the leader of this group. In the meantime, it's actually Aiden. Now, Maggie thinks that Aiden is a young person because of how she met. Oh, that's right. That's how it goes. Aiden's mum, who's in her 80s, I think, but knows people from church, and he thinks that these people are their mum's age. She's talking about friends from church and says that someone that she knows from church knows someone who's looking for a gaming group. That's how Maggie gets involved. So they're the same age roughly. They're like 40 and 50, late 40s, early 50s. Because he found out about her from his mum, he thinks she's therefore her mum's age in her 80s, and because Maggie found out about the gaming group from her son, or possibly her son's best friend, she therefore thinks that Aiden is the age of her son. When they're chatting and getting along really well, they kind of like, yeah, but they're kind of like, I think they're vaguely interested in each other, but they're kind of like, no, but they're too old or they're too young or whatever. Anyway, eventually they meet in person and then figure out the mistake, and then romance ensues. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was really, really well written. Like I said, I really enjoyed the fact that they are older people. So they are, like I said, in their late 40s, early 50s. That felt really authentic as a person who is in her late 40s or mid 40s. They definitely felt that age, which was great. And it was just a lot of fun. Like I said, enjoyed the kind of role reversal switch. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was really well written. There are some harder topics in there to do with abuse and to do with more financial and physical and mental abuse, emotional abuse, and to do with parents aging, to do with sexuality, coming out, different things like that. But anyway, yeah, I thought all those things, as much as I know about those things, was handled really, really well. So that was really good. And yeah, just in general, I thought it was great. And I gave it 5 stars, which means I gave it 5 in Peach as well, so 5 across the board. And yeah, definitely highly recommend if you enjoy romance, if you're looking for something a little bit different within the genre, highly recommend this one. The next book that I finished is not a book that I read the entirety of in the month of August or July or June. I think I started it in April maybe. But anyway, the next book that I want to talk about is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. I don't know, this is kind of a standalone but after the ACOTAR series, so it definitely takes place after the ACOTAR trilogy, but I don't think it's the start of a new series, and it's from a different person's perspective than those three. I guess a standalone within the series, if that makes sense. So we follow Nesta Acheron. Nesta is the older sister of Feyre. Feyre was the main character of the ACOTAR series. So it's after everything that happened in the ACOTAR series. I'm not going to go into detail because there's a lot of stuff that happened in that series, but there's a lot to do with trauma, to do with figuring out changes to your life and figuring out how that affects you and what that means to you, the changes that occurred like against that person's will. There's a lot of sex, there's a relationship that builds. It's also about rebuilding relationships between siblings and friends and family, and I guess just refinding yourself, forgiving yourself, yeah, all of that sort of thing. So there's a lot of stuff in there. I enjoy Sarah J Maas's writing. It's not like the best writing in the world, but I think it's pretty solid, and I like the way that she does deal with trauma. I think she does quite well with trauma and the way that characters deal with trauma, and the way that, you know, sometimes particularly in romantasy, it can be like something will happen and then you never hear about it again. It never seems to affect the character. Sarah J Maas does not do that. She goes the other way. In fact, I think sometimes she leans into it a little bit too much, but anyway. I gave this one 3.2 stars, so rounded down to 3 for Goodreads. The main thing is that, well, I think yes, it leaned into the trauma a little bit too much, but mostly it was too long. Like, Nesta's got a lot that she has to go through. A lot happened to all of the characters in the first 3 books. A lot happened to Nesta in particular. And like I said, she's got a lot of trauma that she needs to get over and needs to figure out. But as a reader, I don't necessarily need to spend like 800 pages wading through and working through this trauma with Nesta. Although I think that it's important to see that because, you know, actual people need to work through trauma some of the time, a lot of time. But I don't think we needed that much of it. Also, the what was actually happening, I feel like it was resolved in ACOTAR. I didn't feel like this was necessary in terms of like what was actually the plot of the story. Like, I feel like it was mostly about Nesta, and then there was some plot thrown in for the sake of we need a plot, but I didn't feel like it was necessary to the overall story, so I'm not really sure what the point of it was, other than I guess we don't want to rehash everything that happened in ACOTAR but put it from Nesta's perspective. So I'm pretty sure that she didn't do that. But yeah, I didn't dislike it, and I'm glad I read it at the very least, because it seems like I will have needed to have read it in order to be able to read the 3rd Crescent City book, which I really want to do. But from the perspective of the ACOTAR series and the characters in the ACOTAR series, I just am not certain that it was needed, although I did think the writing was reasonably good, and I did appreciate the trauma conversation, and I enjoyed it well enough to give it 3 stars and to read it. But yeah, I'm not sure it was necessary. Anyhow, moving on to Song of the Crocodile by Nardi Simpson. So this is another book that I've been working on for a while. I think I started it again in April, possibly May. And I was listening to an audio, and we all know I'm not great at listening to audiobooks. Better at using an audiobook to listen to a book that I'm reading physically as well, so that if I'm going and doing something else, I listen to the audiobook, but I come back to it physically. Then I can read it reasonably quickly, but, or, you know, within a normal, decent amount of time. But just audiobooks in general, not so good at. But anyway, I did read this one and I finished it. I gave it 3.8 stars. So I enjoyed it, but it didn't blow me away. It wasn't completely amazing. It is a historical fiction. It is written by an Aboriginal Australian author, and it is about Aboriginal Australian people. It is set in somewhere, I don't actually know what state it's set in, but it's set in a kind of inland country town, and we follow a youngish woman who is pregnant, and her husband dies, and then we follow her, and then we follow her daughter, and we follow some other characters along the way. And it basically is about the relationship between, I think it's set in like the 1950s or something like that, and it's showing the relationship between Indigenous people and white people, racism that is inherent in Australia, despite what people might have you believe, the way that Indigenous people were treated. They live in this township, which is sort of outside of the town, and it's on the banks of the river, and the river floods a lot. So throughout the book we see them building this levee, and it won't be beneficial to the township where the Indigenous people live, but through things that I won't talk about, one of the main characters is able to get a house on the other side of the levee, but then she's considered to be kind of a traitor to her people. It's about the effect that sexual assault can have on a person and on family and on their relationships, and on how, and on just on, like, not just on the person that it happens to, but to others around her and to future generations, particularly between a white person and a black person, a white man and a black Indigenous person. So there was a lot in here. It was quite, I think it suffered from me listening to audibly. I honestly think I probably would have gotten more out of it had I read it, and read it physically and read it over a shorter period of time. So I may at some point do that just to see whether it's something, because I do think there's a lot in it and it can be very powerful, and I think there's a lot to unpack in this book, and I think that it shows a lot of important things about Australia and the race relations, particularly in history. So I'm very glad I read it, but I do think it suffered from me listening to audibly. But I do think that if you are interested in any of those things that I said, then I would highly recommend. I mean, 3.8, I rounded up to 4 stars on Goodreads. Like, it still came out a pretty good book, but I think had I gotten more out of it, had I, maybe not even necessarily the fact that I listened to it, more the fact that it took so long. But anyway, I would definitely recommend. I think it's definitely worth a read. Then I read Neon Gods by Katie Roberts. This is the first book in her Dark Olympus series. Apologies, the light's gone off again. I don't know how much effect that's having because of the timing of the day, the position of the sun, but anyway, I didn't notice it. Normally I notice it quickly. Anyhow, I'm not going to go into any detail because I did actually read this for a vlog, which hopefully will come out not too far away, but I did give it 3.4 stars, which I rounded up to 3.5 on Book. I think I rounded down to 3 stars, but I would round up to 3.5 if that makes sense. So I did enjoy it. I didn't love it, but I did enjoy it against all odds, I feel like. So this is a dark, smutty romance, which is a retelling of not even any myth particularly, a retelling of the myth of Hades and Persephone, I should say. But yeah, I'm not going to go into any more detail because of that blog, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested. Alright, next up we have On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. Angie Thomas is an African-American author, and this is about a young woman in her, I think she's like 16 or 17, so a teenager who wants to be a rapper. She lives somewhere in the United States. I really don't even know if it mentions where, but I can't remember. Somewhere in the United States. And it's contemporary to when it was written. Like I said, she wants to be a rapper. There's this local thing which takes place in like a boxing gym, and I think it's even called The Ring. But essentially, if you get asked to perform there, then you can perform there. You have to go, and basically you're given a time on stage and you have to come up with a rap. Anyway, she gets asked to do this. It's like very prestigious to get asked to do this for local people. It's really amazing because it's really important to a rap, like a potential future rapper, because people do sometimes get picked up and become actual like recorded artists because of having been in this thing. Bree, our main character is Brianna. She gets called up and gets asked to go along to this, so obviously she does, and she does really, really well. Everyone loves it. It's competition, you're performing against other people, and she kind of smacks down her competition. Her dad used to be a rapper as well, and he got in with gangs and ended up being killed. So through her dad, her family is well known. She's got a lot of trauma in her background due to that. Her mum left her and her brother with their grandparents, with her dad's family, because she was unable to look after them because of being addicted to various drugs. There's a lot in Bree's past. She's got a lot got a lot in her past, a lot of trauma and a lot of difficult things that she needs to be able to kind of move on from, grow from. Her family, her mum has just lost her job, and her older brother wants to go to university but can't because he feels like he needs to be working, and they're not doing well. They're not financially, so they're not doing very well. They often don't have food. They often, like, their power gets cut off, that sort of thing. So they're not doing very well. Bree really wants to make it big within the music scene because she wants to help her family. So she kind of feels like pressure to make it big, because she knows that can be a source of great income, but it's also obviously a really difficult thing to break into. So she's a lot of pressure. She puts a lot of pressure on herself. She feels a lot of pressure. And also she's got a lot of things going on at school. There's a lot of racism happening within her school, and so she's finding that difficult. And yeah, it's just about kind of coming of age and growing up Black in America and what that means, but also aspiring to do really well at this really difficult career choice and art choice. And yeah, I thought it was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, 4 on Peach and 4 stars. I think it's very, very well written. I think it's incredibly important. Like I said, I really enjoyed the way the characters were written. It didn't blow me away, wasn't my favourite thing, so it got 4 stars. I should round that up to 4.5 realistically though, because I did really, really enjoy it. But I have decided to unhaul it because I think that I probably won't reread it, and I think that it's better served because of how powerful it is and what it discusses. I think it would be better off in a local high school or something like that in their library, so that's my plan. But I did really, really enjoy it, and I highly recommend it. And then the final book that I want to talk about, which I finished yesterday, is Castle Shade by Laurie King. This is the 14th, I think, book in the Mary Russell series. Each book is its kind of own individual story. Mary Russell is now 26, I think, 25 or 26. The series starts when Mary Russell is 16 and her family has just died in a car accident. She also was in the car accident, but she survived with a lot of injuries. She was in hospital for a long time, and then she was sent to live from the States to live with her aunt in the UK, in Sussex, and she literally runs into Sherlock Holmes, who was retired. He's in his 60s, I think, 50s or 60s, and he's retired and moved away from London, but he's not really retired. And they run into each other, and then they have like a very odd conversation, but he sees her intelligence and also her loneliness and sadness, and he offers her to be apprenticed to him. She decides to go ahead with that, and then she learns how to be a detective, and then their partnerships continues throughout the next 10 years. And then this book takes place in Transylvania, and they have been asked by the Queen of Romania to go to Castle Bran, which the Queen has been gifted by the people of Transylvania or Romania, because the series of odd events have happened that included a threat to her daughter, and she wants to know what's going on. So she's asked Sherlock Holmes, which now includes Mary Russell, to come and figure out what's going on. So they go and stay in the castle, in Castle Bran. The Queen is there, and they get involved in various happenings around the town, and they try and figure out what's going on. And again, I thought it was fantastic. I gave it 5 stars. I love Laurie King's writing style. I think the way she writes is very intelligent, but in particular Mary Russell is very intelligent and very academic, and that really appeals to me for some reason. So I always enjoy Laurie King's writing style. I always enjoy Mary Russell as a character. And yeah, these are retelling, I guess not really even retelling, a reimagining of the Sherlock Holmes canon. We do have a few books in the series that are kind of retellings of particular Sherlock Holmes stories, but mostly we've taken some of the characters, Sherlock Holmes, Watson's there occasionally as well, and Mycroft is there as well, and put them into this different situation. And it's also when Sherlock Holmes retired. Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. Obviously, as I said, I gave it 5 stars. Love this series. Love, like I said, the writing style. I think Laurie King's writing is impeccable. I love her turn of phrase. I just absolutely love the way she puts things together. I love the way she writes characters. Her descriptions are always fantastic, and just in general, I love it. So I really, really enjoyed this one, as you would imagine, and I'm really happy to have read it and to be working through the series, because I keep saying it's one of my favourite series of all time, but then I haven't actually finished it, so I'm working on that. That's it. That's the book. That's the video. That's everything from me today. Let me know in the comments below if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them. If you have any of these books on your TBR that you're planning on reading, let me know all of that as well. Next year, we will be having the Australian Readathon again in July, so keep an eye out for that on my co-host channels as well, which is Steph from Novelty Corner, Ren from the Reading Wren, and Meredith from Binging and Books. We will also be having a couple of changes and a new co-host, so keep your eye out for all of that. And yeah, like I said, that's everything that I wanted to tell you. Comment anything else that you'd like to comment in the comments below. If you'd like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me an Australian animal emoji, because we have been reading books for the Australian Readathon. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.